Israel struck Iran's nuclear program, hitting the centrifuges of Natanz and Isfahan. They're key to their weapon production. Up to 10 Iranian nuclear scientists were killed, womp womp, potentially setting back weapons development for years. Iran's fortified site poses a challenge, however. Destroying it and uranium stocks are key to hindering the weaponization of nuclear material, so there is still a lot of cleaning up left to do. But will the United States get dragged in? Let's talk to Ian Haworth about that. He's a journalist and an author. He's joining us live here on the Wake Up America show. Good morning, Ian. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Austin. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. Your reaction to Israel's strike on Iran?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, it's a great thing. I think we're going to get into the weeds of America's involvement. But if we step back and just look at, good guys versus bad guys, a radical jihadist regime that's funding terror across the world, that's killing Americans, that's killing Israelis, that's killing all manner of people, that's killing its own people, raping, torturing, brutalizing its own men, women, and children. Women there are tortured if they show their hair in the street. And so the idea that a country like that should have a nuclear weapon is something we should all oppose. And so I think a country like Israel stepping up and actually defending not just itself, which is what it's doing in this case, but also many other people in the world, I think is a good thing. It's very telling, the reactions we saw from all the people you'd expect, and all of the fear-mongering, all of the comparisons to the Iraq War, all of the idea that Israel should just be destroyed. I'm sure we're going to dig into it, but it's a lot of people really showed their stripes this weekend, I think.
The new right would be very triggered by what you just said there, Ian, because they actually see Israel as the aggressor, Israel as the greatest enemy of the United States. They say Israel is the primary problem in the Middle East, and their whole foreign policy is based on the fact that Israel are colonizers, they're aggressors. They initiated this strike as a preemptive strike. And that they are the ones who are to be condemned. What would you say to the Jimmy Dores or the Tucker Carlsons of the world who find your worldview repellent and warmongering and neoconservative?
Well, I think first off, it's interesting. I haven't changed my position. Tucker Carlson is the one who's changed his position. There are videos out there of him calling for the destruction of Iran not all that long ago. And so, if the money from Qatar wants to start flowing in, I'm sure other people would change their minds too. I think we're going to look at the idea of Israel being the aggressor. A lot of people are saying this is I think Dave Smith said it's a preemptive war of aggression. Those two things don't really mix. That's really an oxymoronic statement, because preemptive means you are preempting something. If it was just a war of aggression, Israel would have gone after some other random country that wasn't trying to obtain nuclear weapons to, quote unquote, achieve death to America and death to Israel. I mean, Khomeini literally said death to America isn't just a slogan, it's a policy. So we're dealing with people whose goal is to destroy America and destroy Israel. And you're surprised that Israel actually took that seriously. It's very strange. I don't really understand what people expect Israel to do. Obviously, I know what they would want Israel to do, which is basically bend over and take it. But the idea that any country should just sit there and wait for their enemy to achieve nuclear weapon capabilities before you even react is absurd. Why do we arrest people for making violent threats? Do we have to wait until someone comes and stabs you in the face before we do anything? Of course not. You have a right to defend yourself. It's a basic human right, and that's what Israel is doing here. And again, this isn't about Israel. I would expect this of any other sovereign nation. If there was any other country that was being threatened by an enemy constantly, with people in the streets chanting for their destruction, and a country was just obsessed with trying to gain access to nuclear weapons for the purpose of destroying that country, I would expect the targeted countries to react. America would, any country in Europe would. And I think, again, it's just the double standard that only Israel is expected to be nuked before they think about defending themselves.
No, I think I agree with you from a tactical and strategic point. But I think that what's in Israel's best interest may not necessarily always be in the United States' best interest. I've always been very confident that Israel, unleashed from American foreign policy, would probably do what's in Israel's best interest. And the Middle East might be better off, and Israel certainly would be better off for it. But as we've heard, the United States, because we fund Israel, we get to treat them like a redheaded stepchild. And to some extent, I think that there is an obligation to do so, not necessarily because to implement the foreign policy the United States has implemented towards Israel. But when you hear things like the rumor that Brett Baer played right before he spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu, that the United States prevented Israel for now from striking the supreme leader, killing the mullah, you have to wonder, is it really in Israel's best interest to be taking money or weapons from the United States if our sole goal is to hamstring Israel from being able to do what is necessary to defend itself. Because honestly, if you take the king's coin, you sing the king's song. At the end of the day, you may see that you may think it's better for the United States to be funding Israel to support them because they're an ally, but I see it as a double-edged sword in some respect, Ian, and I wonder how you would respond to that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think to some extent, this is often a straw man a lot of people like me face, because a lot of people say, oh, America shouldn't be funding Israel. It's like, well, if your view is that we shouldn't be funding any other country, I think we can have that discussion. I think in many cases, I agree. I think we should be providing some support to Israel because there is also a benefit to the United States that people just ignore. But there's certainly, everything is a double-edged sword, right? That's the problem we had when we talked about the Ukraine war. Not to change the subject, I will come back to Israel. When we talked about the Ukraine war, a big part of the issue was we were sending a blank check with no expectations of anything in return. And with Israel, we're clearly seeing that sometimes there's nothing expected in return, but quite often there is. That, like, we're asking Israel, or the American government rather, is asking Israel to do certain things, to not do certain things. Certainly under the Biden administration, they were very much hamstrung, and to a lesser extent they are under the Trump administration. But the problem is, I obviously don't have the inside scoop on the balance sheets in Israel in terms of the weaponry they have access to and all that kind of thing. So I'm sure they see much more of a benefit in maintaining that relationship with America, not just in terms of resources, but the absolutely gargantuan amount of knowledge sharing that goes on between the two countries that, again, people ignore. I think we all fundamentally understand the idea of sending guns, of sending bullets, of sending bombs, sending planes, or at least trading these things between the two, because a lot of this isn't given to Israel. A lot of it is actually contracts that Israel pays for.
Right, which is why
the amount of knowledge sharing is huge.
Right, which is why, I've been defending Congressman Thomas Massie for the last few weeks from the blistering attacks from the MAGA people because of the refusal to support the big, beautiful bill. But then there are legitimate things that I think I disagree with Thomas Massie on, and one of them appears to be the policy towards Israel and the question of the amount of influence that Israel has in the United States, at least relative to other foreign regimes, which are certainly spending a lot of money and doing influence campaigns here in the United States as well. But on the question of Israel and how they spend money here, I mean, that we could go down that rabbit hole for weeks and weeks and weeks. But I thought it was unfair framing that Thomas Massie had said, should we give weapons to Israel for that one? Because, any libertarian capitalist is going to say, well, give? No, because we're capitalists and we're going to sell them weapons. And I would sell weapons to my friends if they were under attack. I certainly think the United States could do so in some ways. But I mean, again, it's the question of, do you think that there is any strategic interest for the United States to be involved with Israel whatsoever? And I would suggest that there certainly are good tactical and strategic reasons for the United States to be friends with Israel. But I'm one of those libertarians, Ian, who does not think that we should be funding Israel. And I don't think we should be funding Zimbabwe, and I don't think we should be funding Nigeria, and I don't think we should be funding France or Germany or South Africa or China. I'm one of those people who is a pretty strict across the board, don't fund any of them, let them sort it out. But in turn, there are other ways that you can assist your friends. You can sell them weapons. You can also trade intelligence. But I do have a problem with the sort of the strict interventionist view, Ian, which is that the United States taxpayer, not only do we have to be involved, but the U.S. taxpayer also has to pay for it. And then to some extent, if Israel does, or these other countries do commit a blunder or something that is foul or unfair or goes against the interests of the American people, we have, in essence, the taxpayers, U.S. taxpayers, have funded that transgression. And I do find it to be deeply immoral and wrong. How do you respond?
I mean, that's the issue with entangling yourself with any foreign entity, isn't it? Of that you are essentially rolling the dice to some extent. You're placing trust in other countries to make decisions that are going to align with your goals. Again, people obsess over Israel as if Israel is the only country that this could possibly happen with, but this is a cross-the-board issue.
Yes.
And I think this is why allegiances matter. This is why our allies matter. That is why trust between allies matter.